She moved my whole life into the barn behind the old farm, pointed at the rats like they were my new roommates, and calmly said her father would be living in my house for now. All because I wouldn't give her a loan for a business that smelled like a lie from 10 feet away. What would you do if you were me? Before you scroll past, read this through and tell me if I went too far. And if you've been through something like this, I want to hear how you handled it. My name is Frank Dawson. I'm 68 years old, a grandfather of 2, and I've lived on this property for almost 3 decades. I buried my wife here. I fixed every board, every pipe, every hinge with my own hands. And then my sister-in-law decided my home was a bargaining chip. Linda died 3 years ago. Cancer. Fast and merciless. The kind of illness that doesn't just take a person, it takes the air out of a house and leaves you walking through rooms like you're trespassing in your own life. I kept busy. I had to. The old farm sat behind the house like a second heartbeat. Barn, sheds, fencing, a small orchard Linda loved, and a muddy little pond the grandkids called the lake because it made them feel brave. My daughter Paige lived 40 minutes away with her husband Mike and our 2 grandkids, Lily and Ethan. They came out most weekends. And then there was Diane. Diane was Linda's younger sister, the kind of woman who wore confidence like perfume and expected people to breathe it in gratefully. She always had something going on, always a plan, always a pitch, always a reason she needed help, and it was always urgent. 2 months before she moved me into my own barn, she showed up unannounced in a white SUV that cost more than my first house. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't ask about the grandkids. She walked into my kitchen like it was hers, set her phone on my table, and said, "Frank, I need you to do something for family." That word, family. It was always the word she used when she wanted to pick up something heavy and make it my job to carry it. She told me she was starting a company. An agri-wellness venture, supplements, tinctures, farm-to-body products. She spoke fast, like speed could replace truth. There were investors lined up. There was a distributor ready. There was a website being built. She just needed a bridge loan, $120,000. I remember because my throat went dry just hearing the number. I asked to see her business plan. She slid a folder across the table with glossy pages and pretty photos. Stock images, buzzwords, no permits, no financial statements, no real contracts. When I asked where the product would be made, she said something about partners. When I asked which partners, she said, "Don't get stuck in details." That was when I knew it was either a scam or a disaster, possibly both. I told her no. Not angrily, not smugly. I told her the truth. I was retired. I had savings, yes, but those savings were for medical surprises and for my grandkids. I told her I couldn't gamble my future on a business that refused to answer basic questions. Diane's smile didn't move, but her eyes sharpened. She leaned forward and said, soft as syrup, "Linda would have helped me." And then she did something that still makes my hands clench when I think about it. She said, "Linda would be ashamed of you." I stood up so fast my chair scraped hard against the tile. "Get out," I told her. Diane blinked like she couldn't believe anyone had ever said that to her. She gathered her folder, nodded once, and walked out without another word. For 2 weeks I heard nothing, and I let myself believe that was the end of it. It wasn't. The day it happened was a Tuesday. I had a follow-up appointment in town. Routine stuff, blood work, and a blood pressure check. I left at 9 in the morning and came home just after noon. My driveway was full. A moving truck sat parked crooked near the porch. 2 men in work shirts carried boxes out of my front door. My front door, wide open, like the house had become a store and they were restocking shelves. I pulled my pickup in behind them, got out, and felt something deep in my chest go cold. "What the hell is this?" I called. One of the movers looked at me like I was interrupting a job. "You Frank Dawson?" "Yes." He checked a clipboard. "We got a work order. Move personal items to outbuilding." "Barn." I walked up the porch steps fast and looked into my living room. My recliner was gone. The lamp Linda picked out was gone. The photo of our wedding that sat on the mantel was leaning against a box like it was junk waiting to be hauled off. And then Diane appeared in my kitchen doorway holding a paper cup of coffee, like this was a casual social visit. Her father stood behind her. Earl Whitman, 76. Loud, rude, and permanently offended by the world. He'd never liked me. He thought my farm was wasted land, and my house was too good for a man who didn't know how to use it. Diane lifted her eyebrows. "Oh, good, you're back. We're almost done." I stared at her. "You broke into my house." She shook her head like I was the one being dramatic. "Don't do that. Don't say broke in. I had a key." I felt my face heat. "You do not have a key." She smiled again. "I did. Linda gave me one years ago for emergencies, and this is an emergency." Earl stepped forward, looked me up and down like I was a stray dog, and said, "About time somebody got this place in order." I walked past them into my own hallway and stopped dead. The locks were changed. My bedroom door stood open. My dresser drawers were empty. The closet was stripped down to bare hangers. I turned slowly, like if I moved too fast the world might tilt and drop me somewhere I couldn't climb out of. "You moved my things," I said. Diane held up her phone, as if it was a badge. "I moved your things to the barn. It's on the same property. You'll be fine. It's rustic. You always loved rustic." I took a step closer. "Why is my house full of movers?" She gestured toward Earl. "My dad needs somewhere to stay for a while. His apartment lease ended. He can't live with me because I'm traveling for work." I stared at her, trying to find the part where any of that became my problem. "And you decided my house was the solution," I said. "Frank," she said, like she was speaking to a stubborn child. "I asked you for help. You refused. Now I'm asking again in a different way." It clicked then, clear as a bell. This wasn't about Earl. Earl was a prop, a weight she could hang around my neck and call it duty. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "You give me the loan, and this all becomes temporary. You don't, and Dad stays. You can sleep in the barn until you remember what family means." For a moment, the only sound in the house was the tape gun snapping shut on another box. I forced myself to breathe. "I'm calling the sheriff," I said. Diane shrugged. "Go ahead." I did call. I stood on my porch, phone pressed to my ear, watching a stranger carry my life out of my home. A deputy showed up 20 minutes later. Young, tired eyes. He listened politely while Diane stood behind me on the porch sipping coffee like she was enjoying the weather. The deputy asked one question that made my stomach drop. "Is she family?" "Yes," I said. "She's my sister-in-law." He nodded slowly. This might be a civil matter. Diane smiled like she'd rehearsed that moment. I said, "She doesn't own this house." Diane held up a printed document. "He's letting my father stay. It's temporary. He's upset." The deputy glanced at the paper like it was something he'd seen too many times. He handed it back to her and looked at me with the expression people wear when they've already decided you're going to be a headache. "Sir," he said, "if there's no violence, and she has access to the property, you may need to take this up in court." I stared at him. "She moved me into a barn." He glanced toward the barn in the distance, then back at me. "Sir, you said it's on your property." The words landed like a slap. Not because they were cruel, but because they were empty. A man can be destroyed with paperwork and polite language. Diane watched the deputy leave and said, "See, let's not make this ugly. Sign the loan paperwork and we'll fix everything. Dad will be out within a month." I should have exploded. I should have screamed until my throat tore. But something in me went very still. I looked past her at my house, My house with Earl standing inside like a new owner inspecting a purchase. And I realized Diane wasn't guessing. She was confident. Too confident. She thought she had something stronger than a key and a bluff. So I said the only thing that bought me time. "I'll stay in the barn tonight," I told her. "But this isn't over." Diane's smile widened. "Good choice." That evening I walked my suitcase through wet grass toward the barn. The barn hadn't been used for livestock in years. I kept tools in one corner, old equipment in another. It smelled like dust, oil, and old hay that had never fully died. The roof leaked in 3 places. I knew that. I'd planned to fix it in spring. Rats didn't live in the barn, not officially, but something was definitely moving along the walls once the sun set. I heard scratching, then a hard little scurry behind a stack of feed bags. I set my suitcase down and stood there in the dim light, letting the humiliation settle. 68 years old, and I was sleeping in a barn because I wouldn't hand over money to a woman who treated guilt like a weapon. I went back to the house once, just to grab my medications. The door was locked. The key didn't fit. I knocked, and Earl opened it with a smirk. "What do you want?" he said. "My blood pressure meds," I said. "They're in the bathroom cabinet." Earl leaned against the doorframe. "You should have thought of that before you started acting like a tyrant." Behind him I saw Diane's phone on my kitchen counter, plugged in like she belonged there. I felt something in me threaten to crack, but I didn't let it. "I'm not asking you," I said quietly. "I'm telling you. Those meds keep me out of the hospital." Earl stared at me, then turned and shouted, "Diane! He wants his little pills!" Diane appeared, annoyed, like I'd asked for a favor. She disappeared down the hall and came back holding the orange bottle between 2 fingers. She didn't hand it to me. She set it on the porch rail like she was feeding a stray cat. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "This is temporary." And she closed the door in my face. That night the temperature dropped. I lay on an old cot I'd used during hunting season 20 years ago, listening to rain tap through the leaks. A slow drip hit a metal pan I'd shoved under the worst spot. Drip, 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 like a clock counting down to something. At 3 a.m, something brushed my boot. I jerked awake. My heart punched hard. A rat, big, bold, filthy, stood near the cot, sniffing the air like it owned the place. I didn't scream. I sat up and stared at it. It stared back. Then it scurried into darkness. I lay there shaking, not from fear, but from rage so sharp it made my teeth ache. In the morning, I did what Diane didn't expect. I started documenting. I took photos of my home with my belongings piled in a barn. I took video of the changed locks. I recorded a quiet walkthrough of the barn. The leaks, the chewed insulation, the rodent droppings in the corners. I took a close-up of the bites on a feed bag. Then I went to my safe. Not the one in the house. Diane didn't know about the one in the barn. Linda and I had installed it years ago inside a false wall behind a tool cabinet. I'd hidden our original deed, old insurance paperwork, and copies of every major document there. Not because I distrusted Linda, because I distrusted life. I opened it and pulled out the deed to my house and the property tax records. My name. Only my name. I also pulled out something that made my throat tighten. A letter in Linda's handwriting, sealed in an envelope with my name on it. I hadn't seen it before. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Frank, if anything ever happens to me and Diane tries to involve you in her mess, do not give her money. She loves you when she needs you. She resents you when you don't. I've seen what she becomes when she's desperate." I sat on an overturned bucket and read it twice, 3 times. Linda had known. And if Linda had known, Diane had probably always been capable of this. That's when the plan became clear. I wasn't going to fight Diane with shouting. I was going to fight her with receipts. For 3 days, I stayed in the barn. Not because I accepted it, because I needed her comfortable, careless, confident. I watched the house from a distance. I noted who came and went. Diane left twice, always dressed like she was going to a meeting. Earl stayed inside watching my television through my window like it was a trophy. I also noticed something strange. A small mailbox flag at the end of the drive had been replaced. Same post, different box, new lock. That night, after the house lights went out, I walked down to the mailbox with a flashlight and looked closer. My name wasn't on it. Diane's was. My stomach dropped again, but this time it came with certainty. She wasn't just trying to humiliate me, she was trying to control my mail. I drove into town the next morning and went straight to the post office. I waited in line behind people buying stamps and sending holiday cards, and I stood at the counter with my hands flat like I was holding myself down. I need to know if there's a change of address on file, I told the clerk. The clerk tapped on her computer, asked for my ID, and frowned. There was a mail hold requested, she said, and then a forwarding order submitted. Forwarded where? I asked. She read an address that made my jaw tighten. Diane's address. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I asked for the form that showed who submitted it. The clerk hesitated, then said, "This was submitted online. It says authorized family member." I stood there for a second, feeling the world narrow. Then I thanked her and walked out. In my truck, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel and made one call. Not to Paige, not to friends, not to Diane, to my attorney. His name was Warren Klein. He'd helped Linda and me with our will years ago. A practical man with a calm voice. When I told him what happened, there was a pause long enough that I could hear him inhale. "Frank," he said, "do you have your deed?" "Yes." "Good. Now, I need you to tell me something very carefully. Has Diane ever had access to your personal documents? Social security number, bank information, anything like that?" I looked at the barn in my mind. The boxes, the scattered papers, the chaos she created on purpose. "I don't know," I admitted. Warren's voice hardened. "Then you need to assume yes. Go to your bank today." I did. My bank manager was a woman named Denise. She'd known Linda. She'd hugged me at the funeral. When I explained what was happening, Denise's expression shifted from sympathy to alarm. She pulled up my accounts, and then she leaned closer to her screen like she didn't trust what she was seeing. "There was an application started," she said slowly, "for a home equity line of credit." My stomach went hollow. "By me?" Denise clicked again, then looked at me. "It was started online," she said, "and it's nearly complete." "How complete?" I asked. Denise swallowed. "There's a digital signature." I stared at her. "I did not sign anything." Denise's face went tight. "Frank, the signature matches your file." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Diane hadn't just moved my belongings. She was trying to mortgage my house. And that was when the anger in me finally turned into something else. Focus. Denise didn't panic. She called someone in their fraud department. She took notes. She printed documents. She asked me to sign an affidavit saying the application wasn't mine. She told me not to confront Diane directly yet. Then she said something that made my blood run cold all over again. "Frank, the application lists an alternate mailing address. The paperwork was set to be delivered to that address." Diane's address. She had planned this. She planned to get the loan, drain the equity in my house, and leave me sleeping in a barn while she walked away with money. I left the bank with copies of everything. Warren told me to come to his office immediately. I sat across from him while he flipped through the papers, his jaw tightening more with each page. "This is bank fraud," he said, "identity theft, and the break-in and property removal is a separate matter." I asked the question that mattered most. "How do I get my house back today?" Warren looked at me carefully. "Frank, we can get an emergency order, But we can also do something else. He tapped the HELOC paperwork. We can let her think it's working, he said, and catch her in the act. That's when I smiled for the first time in days, because Diane had been so busy trying to make me small that she forgot one thing. I built my life solving problems, and she just gave me the biggest one I'd had in years. Second hook. That same afternoon, Warren called me back into his office with a printed email from the bank's fraud department. They pulled the IP logs, he said. The application was submitted from a device tied to Diane's business account. Then he slid over one more page. It was a scanned document attached to the application, a power of attorney form, with my name on it, and a signature that looked like mine, if you squinted and didn't care about truth. Warren's voice went low. Frank, she's trying to establish legal authority over you. If she gets a judge to believe you're confused or incompetent, she can do a lot of damage. I felt the room tilt slightly. Because suddenly the barn wasn't just an insult. It was a setup. A story she could tell. Frank is old. Frank is unstable. Frank chose to sleep in the barn. Frank needs help making decisions. Diane wasn't just stealing my house. She was trying to erase me as a person. That night, the weather turned violent. Wind hammered the barn. Rain came sideways like it was thrown. I lay on the cot fully dressed, shoes on, flashlight in my hand, listening to the roof groan. And then it happened. A crack like a gunshot. A heavy section of the old tin roofing tore loose and slammed down inside, not 10 feet from where I'd been lying. If I'd been in the wrong spot, it would have crushed me. I stood there in the cold, rain spraying in through the new gap, and I realized Diane's punishment could have killed me. And that meant I was done being patient. The next morning, I called Paige and told her to come out with the kids. She arrived white-faced and furious. She'd heard Diane's version already, of course. Frank is being stubborn. Frank is overreacting. Dad needs a place to stay. Frank is punishing family. Paige stepped into the barn and covered her mouth with her hand when she saw the hole in the roof and the wet cot and the bait traps I'd set overnight. "Dad," she whispered, "you've been sleeping here?" I looked at my daughter, the same way I looked at the house the first day I came home and found strangers carrying my life out. "I've been surviving here," I said, because Diane wanted leverage. I didn't ask Paige to pick sides. I showed her the paperwork, the bank prints, the mail forwarding confirmation, Linda's letter. Paige read it, and tears rolled down her face without sound. "I didn't know," she whispered. "No," I said. "You didn't. That's why I'm telling you now, and that's why you're going to stay calm and do exactly what I say next." We didn't storm the house. We didn't shout. We did what Diane never expected. We let her walk into her own trap. Warren coordinated with the bank's fraud investigator in the county sheriff's office. The plan was simple. Diane wanted money. She wanted me to sign something. She wanted a clean finish where she could claim I agreed to the loan. So I gave her the illusion. I called Diane and said in a tired voice, "Come by tonight. We need to talk." She sounded triumphant. "Finally!" I said, "Bring whatever papers you want me to sign. I'll cooperate. I just want my bed back." There was a pause, and then a softness that was pure performance. "Oh, Frank," she said, "I knew you'd come around." That afternoon, Warren set up the kitchen table inside my house like a stage. Not for a fight, for a confession. A small camera sat hidden behind a cookbook. Another sat near the window. The bank's fraud investigator, a man named Cullen, waited in an unmarked car down the road with 2 deputies. Warren sat with me at the table, pretending to be a family friend helping translate paperwork. Paige was in my truck with the kids at the far end of the property because I wasn't putting my grandchildren in the middle of this. At 7:12 p.m., Diane's SUV rolled up the driveway. Earl followed behind her in my house like he was the host and she was the guest. Diane walked into my kitchen wearing a blazer like this was a business meeting. She set a folder on my table and didn't even pretend to be nervous. "Okay," she said, flipping it open. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to sign the authorization, and then we'll release the funds. It will cover everything, and Dad can stay here while I stabilize the company. You'll be helping family, like Linda would have wanted." Warren leaned forward. "And this authorization is for what exactly?" Diane smiled at him like he was slow. "A home equity line. Very normal. Frank's house has more than enough value." I kept my voice small on purpose. "How much?" Diane didn't blink. $250,000. My hands tightened under the table. She wasn't asking for a loan anymore. She was taking $250,000 out of my home. "And where does that money go?" Warren asked. Diane's eyes flicked. "To the company." "And if the company fails?" Warren asked. Diane laughed lightly. "It won't." Earl grunted. "He won't be around forever anyway." That sentence sat in the air like smoke. I looked at Diane. "Why did you move my things to the barn?" Her smile hardened. "Because you wouldn't listen. Because you needed to feel what it's like to have nothing. Because you've been controlling since Linda died. And now it's time for someone else to make decisions." Warren's voice stayed calm. "And the power of attorney?" Diane's head snapped slightly. "What?" Warren slid the printed copy across the table. "This power of attorney form. Did you submit this?" Diane stared at it, and for a fraction of a second, her mask slipped. Then she recovered fast. "Frank signed that." I said, "No, I didn't." Earl stepped forward. "He doesn't remember what he signs. He's confused half the time." Diane nodded, building momentum. "Exactly. And that's why we need to do this properly. For his own good." Warren looked at her. "So you're saying Frank is mentally incompetent?" Diane hesitated, then smiled again. "I'm saying Frank is not in a position to make smart choices. Which is why I'm helping." That was the moment. Because she'd said it out loud. She'd put her intent on the table with her own mouth. Warren stood and opened the front door. 2 deputies walked in first, then Colin from the bank. Diane's face went blank, like her mind couldn't find the script for this scene. "Diane Whitman?" Colin asked. "I'm with the bank's fraud division. We need to speak with you about an unauthorized credit application and forged documents." Earl's mouth opened. "This is a misunderstanding." One deputy stepped forward. "Ma'am, please stand up." Diane's voice finally found volume. "Frank did this? Frank, are you serious? After everything? You're going to call the police on family?" I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her. "You moved me into a barn," I said. "You tried to steal my house. You tried to make me disappear." Diane's eyes flashed with rage. "You're an old man clinging to a property you can't maintain. You don't deserve it." Colin reached into his folder. "We have the device logs, the IP history, the submission record, and your business email tied to the application. We also have a recorded conversation of you describing intent." Diane's face drained, because she finally understood. This wasn't a family argument. This was evidence. The deputies cuffed her at my kitchen table. Earl lunged forward like he might swing, then stopped when the second deputy stepped into his path. For a moment I saw the truth of him, an old bully who only knew how to win when nobody resisted. They escorted Diane out. Earl stood in my kitchen trembling with fury and humiliation. Then he spat one word at me: "Traitor," and he walked out too. The aftermath was less dramatic but more satisfying. Diane's company didn't just collapse. It turned out she'd been taking investor deposits without proper disclosures. The bank flagged her accounts. The sheriff's office forwarded information to other agencies. People started calling Paige, asking questions. Friends of Linda, who had been quiet, suddenly remembered Diane's projects over the years, and how many people ended up broke. Within a week, I had my locks replaced again, properly this time, and cameras installed on every corner of the house. Within 2 weeks, Warren filed for a restraining order, and I got it. Within a month, Diane's father was out, and the house was mine again in the most basic way. It was quiet. It smelled like coffee and old wood and the kind of peace you only notice after it's been stolen. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I celebrated by sleeping in my own bed and waking up without rain tapping on my face through a hole in a barn roof. Paige brought Lily and Ethan over the next weekend. Lily ran into my arms like she thought if she held on tight enough nobody could move me again. I walked them down to the barn and showed them the hole in the roof. I showed them the cot. Ethan's face tightened. "Aunt Diane made you sleep here?" "Yes," I said. He looked down, fists clenched. "That's mean." "It was," I said, "and it was dangerous." That night, after the kids fell asleep, Paige sat at my kitchen table and cried until her shoulders shook. "I should have seen it," she whispered. "I should have protected you." I reached across and squeezed her hand. "You're here now. That matters." As for me, I fixed the barn roof, not because I needed it, because I wanted to. I replaced the rotted boards, sealed the leaks, set proper traps, and cleaned every corner until the place smelled like fresh lumber instead of humiliation. Then I put a chair in there anyway, facing the big open doors, looking out over the orchard Linda loved. Not as punishment, as a reminder. A reminder that people can try to take your home, your dignity, your name, and still fail if you keep your head and use the tools you've earned in a lifetime. So tell me this. Was I wrong for setting her up instead of confronting her immediately? Was I wrong for letting her walk into handcuffs in my own kitchen after she tried to turn me into a man sleeping with rats?
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.